Last month, I noticed that something was off with my boyfriend. He was being too nice recently, like cleaning up his dirty dishes and being attentive to my needs. I would have thought this was a good thing if only I hadn't caught him waking up in the middle of the night and leaving the house. I tried waiting for him to come back, but I fell asleep after some time. And the next thing I knew, he was back in bed with me. That morning, it clicked on me, like I had found all the pieces to the puzzle. That's why he was acting so nice. And recently, I would admit that we haven't had any intercourse, and I thought he just wasn't in the mood. Now I know why. He was having an affair. I was furious and heartbroken. I told my best friend Natalie all about it, and she was as heartbroken as me. She kept asking if I was sure about it. I mean, what other explanation could there be? He'll be gone the whole night, and he'll be back in the morning. What did he do? Buy some milk. I told her that I had a plan. I'm going to wake up before he does and catch him red-handed. My best friend just nodded and said that was a good idea. That night, my boyfriend prepared a nice meal for me, something he hadn't done before, and I was mildly surprised. I pretended not to know anything about his infidelity, so our conversation went normally. However, when we finally settled back in bed, I fell asleep almost instantly. My sleep was so good that I wasn't able to wake up at midnight. I was disappointed with myself. How could I have slept on it? What's weird was that on the following nights, that kept happening to me. I couldn't wake up in the middle of the night. I also tried staying up all night, but at some point, I would fall asleep. That is very unusual, since I have been a night shift employee before, and I didn't have this kind of trouble suddenly falling asleep. Sometimes I can't even remember what happened last night. My crazy brain thought maybe my boyfriend was drugging me. Putting something on to make me sleep through the night is the only possible explanation I could think of. But then I asked myself, how did he know about my plan? My heart sank as I realized the answer to my question. Natalie is my best friend. I couldn't believe it. Why would she betray me? Is she my boyfriend's lover? At this point, I was intoxicated with anger. I skipped dinner and only drank water from the tap. I made sure none of my boyfriend's drugs would reach me. My boyfriend was even persistent in suggesting that I eat or at least drink some milk. To me, that was a confirmation that he was indeed drugging me. I was about to confront him about his infidelity right then and there, but I felt a blunt force hit me at the back of my head, and I was out. When I came to, I was tied up in bed, and my boyfriend was watching me in the corner of our bedroom. He was biting his lips and was pale as a sheet. "What is this?" I asked him. His eyes lit up when he saw me awake. He then ran to our living room and called for someone. My heart sank as I saw who it was. It was Natalie. I yelled immediately after seeing her. "It was you! How fucking dare you!" I shouted at her. Natalie asked me to calm down. "It's not what you think," she kept repeating. "I'm going to kill you both when I get out of here." I kept trying to free myself, but to no avail. They used some of the thickest rope I've seen. "Babe, listen to me," my boyfriend said. "I'm not cheating on you." And certainly, Natalie and I have no romantic relationship. I get out of bed every night because I need to stay safe. "Stay safe?" I asked. "Stay safe from what?" "From you," he answered quickly. "What?" "Jace, it's near 3. We should get out of here," Natalie whispered. My boyfriend then took out a paint bucket and painted my hands and legs with red paint. I squirmed and yelled as he did it in a hurry. All the while, I was thinking, who is this person? Is this really my boyfriend? How could he do all of this to me? As if he could hear my thoughts, he kissed my forehead and said, "You'll understand everything tomorrow, I promise." Before I could reply, he and Natalie ran away, and I was all alone in our bedroom. I kept screaming for help, but I knew it was pointless. My mind was racing as fast as my heartbeat. My lungs felt like they were shrinking as I breathed for air. No, 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 no. How could they do this to me? Why are they doing this? I kept trying to free myself, but I got exhausted at some point and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was still in bed. But I noticed that the ropes that bound me last night were now roughly severed, and my wrist burned like hell. As I looked around the room, I understood Jace. The floor, the walls, and the ceiling were also full of red handprints. My handprints. I shouldn't have done it. If I knew what would happen when I did it, I would never have done it. I didn't want this. No one would want this. It's been 3 weeks now. I was walking through the big nature reserve behind the train lines with my dog. Echo. It wasn't unusual. I do the walk most mornings. He's not a huge dog. He's just a collie mix. He's harmless and always loves meeting new people when we're out. That being said, there's never been anyone on this path that we walk. It's actually not so much a path. It isn't pavement or concrete, but a faint trail. It's a lovely route, but it's so hidden that not many people know it's here. Even locals, like myself, are blissfully unaware of its beauty and hidden gems. At least, that's what I thought when I moved here 6 months ago, and discovered my new favorite trek. It's around 30 minutes away from the road, and I found it by chance after one very long Sunday exploration, and one very excited Echo, running off. It was his discovery, really. This was back when I first moved here. It had only been about 2 weeks, and I was starting to find my feet at the new house. It was a small house, but it was cozy, and it was all I could afford here since my ex, Kendra, had left me. She took the house in the divorce, but I got the dog. That stupid little dog led me to it. It all makes sense that no one goes there now. Maybe it was some sort of natural avoidance people had. I thought it was great at first. So untouched by man. No graffiti on the cliffs and no litter in sight for miles. I threw Echo's favorite blue ball across the field. He loved that thing and took it everywhere with him. He always ends up ruining and chewing through the other ones I get him. But this one he hasn't wrecked yet. He went hurtling after it and disappeared into the thick bushes near the woods. I remember it being so pretty and serene. Not even the noise of birds in the trees or flying ahead. Thinking back, I never heard any birds any time I went there. I always just chalked it up to Echo scaring them off or them staying away because of him. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. They knew to stay away from here. Something I didn't know at the time. He didn't come back. I shouted for him for what felt like ages. This wasn't like him. He usually comes running straight away when I shout his name. Echo. I started towards the bushes and woodlands to retrieve whatever had occupied him. As I got close, I crouched down to look through the bushes, expecting to see my Echo and his little blue ball. I had my hood up to stop the wind when I heard a crunch from behind me. I turned my head to see Echo sitting right there, where I was standing before. I stood up and shouted at him. He bounded up to me, excited as ever, but he was missing his ball. That little blue ball, it couldn't be far. I pushed through the bushes to see if I could see it, but it wasn't around. I got my phone out to use the flashlight to see better in the underbrush. The light suddenly went off, and my phone shut down, out of battery. After 10 minutes, I felt defeated. I'm sorry, boy. I'll get you a new blue ball. Hey, how does that sound? We might even find it when we come tomorrow, I say to him, as if he can comprehend what I'm saying. That was the weird thing. He didn't mind leaving the clearing without it. He trotted with me all the way down the path and towards the road home. It was starting to get dark around 10 minutes into the walk back. We were still a while from the road and walking through the long grass, as we always do. I heard a snap of some branches near me, which made me turn my head towards the noise. There was a tall man in white, walking to my left. I had never seen anyone here before, so it startled me. But it was public land, after all, I thought to myself. I smiled at him with that awkward, polite smile that you do when you see someone walking by and carried on through the long grass. Echo started to growl as he crossed in front of us. Bad boy. No stop. I shushed him as his ears flattened and his tail dropped. This was so out of character for him. I apologized to the man as he passed, but got no response or remote acknowledgement. I just figured he either didn't like dogs very much, or was some sort of recluse who didn't like people. It would make sense why he walked this trail if it was the latter, I suppose. By the time we reached the house, it was almost completely dark. I unlocked the door and let Echo in. As I was taking off my coat, I felt around for my phone and my stomach dropped. I didn't have it. I had an instant panic. The weather was dry, and I had a waterproof case on it. So that's at least a win. I could have dropped it anywhere on the whole walk back. I looked at Echo with his head in his water bowl. Poor boy is missing his blue ball. His ball. That was when my phone died. I looked out the window, dreading going back out. I was so tired, but I couldn't really leave it outside till tomorrow. I knew I couldn't afford another one right now. I opened the kitchen drawer and rummaged through it. I pulled out a flashlight for the journey back. I grabbed my car keys and headed toward the door. It shouldn't take long if I drive as close as I can get and walk quickly. I'll be back soon, boy. I drove as close as I could get to the clearing. It would still be a 20-minute walk, even at my pace, so I decided to jog. It was completely pitch black now, even more so here, without the comfort of streetlights. I was starting to wish I had just waited until tomorrow morning. Damn phone. It all looked so different in the dark. I couldn't be sure I was in the right place. For all the times I had been here, I felt completely lost. Nothing looked the same. There were trees that weren't there before. There were bushes where I thought the path should have been. I wish I could say I just gave up and went back, but I didn't. Well, I tried to, but that's the thing. When I turned around, the route had changed. A stream was behind me that I didn't walk through. I couldn't even walk around it. It was over 2 meters wide at every point. I followed it each way for over 10 minutes. I knew I didn't walk diagonally. It was impossible. The moon was thin and didn't give off much light. But it was in front of me the whole walk here. It was in front of me every way I turned, actually. That's insane. I remember thinking that can't be possible, but it was. That's exactly what was happening. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know how long I had been out there. My torch was the only thing I had with me, along with the car keys. But they were just as helpful as my dead phone would have been if I had it. The air was dry and it hadn't rained for days, but my feet were suddenly sinking into wet mud. I was struggling to keep my balance in the mud. If I kept going, I had to hit the road. I had to. That's when I saw it. So out of place, so random. There was no sign of any buildings anywhere around here. Not even a real path. That's what made it even weirder. It wasn't attached to anything. It was just there. It was a stone staircase, leading straight up to nowhere. I stopped for the first time since I got here. It was a calming feeling. I felt relieved. I don't know why. I was still lost. This didn't help. I had never seen it before. It's not like I could use it to find my way back, but I felt calm. It was lighter here too. Maybe that's why I felt calm. I could see. I wish I could say I thought it through. I thought it would give me a vantage point, that I could see further, maybe see the road. But the truth is, I felt so drawn to the stairs. They were begging me to climb them. It felt like if I climbed them, everything would be okay. So I did. I got closer and took a step. It felt so different beneath my foot. Not just solid in comparison to the mud. I can't describe it. I just felt there was nothing to hold on to, just the stairs. They kept going higher and higher, and I kept climbing. They seemed to never end. They just kept climbing. And so did I. They reached above the trees, but I couldn't see anything. The trees were taller now as I looked out. The further my view got, the taller the trees seemed to grow. I looked up at the stairs. They didn't seem to have an end. I kept telling myself I would go just a little further. I would see the end, but I couldn't. I looked down and I can't see the ground. I tried walking back. I walked much longer than I walked up. I've come to the conclusion that I'm stuck here, on these stairs. It's been night the whole time, too. I can't remember what a day even looks like. I don't know exactly how much time has passed. I think it's been about 3 weeks. I don't feel tired or hungry. I don't feel exhausted from walking. It's like I don't feel anything. I don't know where I am. I don't think I'll ever get off these stairs or find the bottom again. I think I'll keep climbing. I think I'll keep climbing. It has to end eventually, right? I'm sitting now on the stairs. It's cold, but I don't really feel it. Not like I think I should. I'm so high up. I just want to go home. I put my hand in my coat pocket. I feel something that wasn't there before. I pulled it out and looked at it. I laughed myself. It's that stupid blue ball. On the night of April 17th, 1956, I was with several friends sitting on a beach, listening to Captain Castillo as he told us scary stories by a campfire. I wasn't particularly fond of scary stories, but I knew Eva would be there. She loved scary stories. And I loved her. That night would alter the course of my life forever in so many ways, although I didn't know it at the time. I was 13. Captain Castillo was a lifelong sailor and a rambler of the high seas. His long white hair was always pulled back into a tight ponytail, and his leathery, weather-worn skin was stretched over a spindly frame. His voice was low and powerful. He may have been an old sea dog, but his accent was that of a Spanish gentleman. He could command any room that he walked into at half the volume of anyone else. His eyes were a frigid gray, set in a warm face with hard lines down the sides of his mouth, due to the constant smile of a man who is satisfied with his life. Although he may well have been in his 70s, he had a boyish charm that refused to age with his body, and he never missed an opportunity to give a flattering word to any woman he crossed paths with. He ran his own rig and refused to hire any hands to help him. Content to toil every day with the love of his life, La Bestia Hermosa. La Bestia was a 30-foot vessel, just as worn and weather-beaten as her captain. When she would come back into the bay every night, she would belch out great gobs of black smoke into the foggy skies. The ship was a patchwork of repairs and modifications, with no efforts to blend them into a cohesive whole. The only thing about La Bestia that could be considered beautiful was the wooden figurehead of an angel under the bowsprit. Captain Castillo was as diligent about his angel's upkeep as he was about neglecting the way everything else looked. The angel held a sword in one hand and cradled a baby in the other. Unlike most figureheads I had ever seen, her eyes were not pointed up but down. She held the sword low as well, as if she were keeping watch for any dangers that might arise from the depths. The captain always sat at the same spot on the beach after the sun went down. Captain's spot is what it was known as around town. There was an old John boat that the ocean had spat far up onto the beach decades before. No one ever claimed it, and for some reason, no one ever thought to remove it. When Captain Castillo decided to settle in the little fishing town, back when it was more of a village, he took a shine to the corroded derelict. He always used to joke that he had claimed it for Spain, and even painted a Spanish flag on either side of the rusty bow. He had fashioned a backrest on the second bench, and for over 30 years, every night except for the night of the Lord's Day, he would sit in that boat. He'd lean back with his bare feet on the front bench, drown the aches and pains of a hard day's work in liquor, and watch the waves until it was time for him to get some sleep, only to get up the next day and do it all over again. It was sort of a town tradition for kids to go down and listen to his stories. My mom and dad listened to them when they were kids. I guess you could say he was like a saltier, morbid version of Mr. Rogers. Instead of telling stories that would lift people up, he would tell stories of people being pulled down to bad deaths at the bottom of Davy Jones' locker. He would always hide the medicine of a moral in there somewhere. But most kids were there for the thrills. Stories of murderous sailors who went mad with thirst and heat. Stories of legions of fish, people who would lay claim to the citizens of seaside towns every 100 years. and feast on their flesh. The captain was a hard-nosed Catholic, and he always managed to tie his faith into every one of his tales, whether it was the moral or the wrath of an angry god. The night of April 17th, 1956, was no different. I'd been feeling ill all day, but I never said anything to my parents. I could have used the excuse to stay home from school, but that would mean that I couldn't be on the beach that night. The day dragged on until, finally, the sun began to sink. I was exhausted, and I had fallen asleep just after supper, but I was up again after my friends came knocking on our front door. By the time we got down to the beach, there was already a small campfire burning just off the bow of Captain's Spot. As Castillo rambled on about the dangers that lurk in the deep and the waves reached up behind us in the darkness, my head began to burn and throb. I honestly don't remember a lot of what he said that night, but I do remember his last story. I had heard it several times before, and it was always the one that bothered me the most. But this time was different. I remember every word because it was the last story I would ever hear. When St. Michael expelled the filth from paradise, the corrupted angels were all cast down, cursed to inhabit the earth forever, never to see paradise again. This was long before men and women were created, long before God himself created the sun and the stars, long before the waters were forced to retreat from the land. The wicked traitors fell from the skies and plunged into the depths. Their plummeting bodies created all manner of canyons and trenches at the bottom of the lonely ocean when they finally came to rest. The cold, crushing blackness of it all drove them mad, and they became twisted perversions of the beautiful creatures they once were. Unable to die, but unable to live, they fell into a deep slumber. Ages passed, and the world was created anew. Some of them began to wake up. They started to feed on the new creatures that ventured down or the bodies of great fish that sank to the bottom. The fallen angels began to grow stronger again. For many centuries, the devils stayed hidden in the depths, ashamed to show their forms in the light in the face of the God that they betrayed. But wickedness grows and becomes shameless over time. Many of them, the most blasphemous ones, began to rise toward the surface, to break the waters to feed on God's new creations. Their songs can be heard in the wind if one listens. Beautiful songs of lies and seductions. If you were to listen too long, you would be cursed, just as they were, cursed to join them at the bottom of the ocean forever. My head was getting heavier, and I felt hot while I listened to him finish the story. I thought that I was sitting too close to the fire. I tried to stand up to move away, and that's when the whole world turned and I fell into the sand. I heard the crashing waves and everything faded away around me. I woke up a month later in a hospital, an hour away from my home. My hearing was gone, taken by a fever that should have killed me. It took a very long time for me to adjust to my new life. Much later, I would learn ale, but while I lived in that town, that was not a possibility back then. It wouldn't have been much use anyway. I became very good at reading lips. I had to. Thankfully, everyone I was around was incredibly supportive. I have a strong feeling of pride that I came from a place where the people were so giving and caring. In that sense, I have been a very fortunate man. Maybe that's why our town was chosen. There was too much good in it. I remember going back to school for the first time and seeing Neva. It was a hard day. I realized that I would never hear her voice again, the sweetest sound I had ever known. I would still go to the captain's spot with my friends, and Castillo was very deliberate in speaking directly to me so I could read his lips. I started to enjoy his stories. It became a very personal thing for me because it felt like he was just telling the story to me and no one else. His voice had already been burned into my brain, so I could imagine the sound of every word. For some reason, he took an interest in me, and we became very close. He asked me if I wanted to go fishing with him off the end of the pier, and it became something I did every Sunday afternoon. One day, while we were both sitting on the rail at the end of the pier, I turned to him and tugged at his sleeve. "I thought you never went fishing on Sunday." "Well, The captain never works on Sunday. That day belongs to God. This doesn't work, Miguel. This is worship. When I turned 15, he hired me on as a hand 2 days a week. He had never had a hand before, and I was honored that he chose to share La Bestia Hermosa with me. And I fell in love with the sea for a time. For almost 3 years, in spite of losing my hearing, it was some of the best times of my life. It was a Saturday in late April, and I was 16. The sun was about to come up, and the captain was getting the boat ready at the dock. He stopped his work and lit a cigarette as I walked down to him. "Good morning, Miguel." "Morning." I was thinking, I think it would be best if you were to take the day off. "Why?" "Miguel, it's going to be warm today. The first warm day of the year." "Yes, sir. I was thinking you might be far more interested in the beach today. I have a feeling you might want to cast your net there instead of out in the water with an old prune like me." "What?" "Women, Miguel. The most beautiful and wonderful things God ever created. There's going to be a bounty to behold on the sand. Stay behind and catch one of those. If I were 5 years younger, I'd stay with you." He smiled and winked, and a gentle trail of smoke came through his teeth. I smiled back at him. "There is a girl, isn't there?" "There is. Of course there is." "Sing to her, Miguel. Don't wait. Life is short. Sing to her before some silver-tongued devil does it first and takes her away forever." He clapped me on the shoulder. "I will see you tonight, my friend. Unless God smiles on your efforts or the devil himself runs me down." It was about an hour before dusk. I had spent the day at the end of the pier with a fishing pole in my hand. Most of the town had gathered on the beach to enjoy the weather. The captain was right. There were lots of girls on the beach, including the only one I ever had eyes for, but my ability to speak to her was only slightly better than my ability to hear. So I was content just to sit on the rail at the end of the pier and enjoy the lazy day. Every so often, I would steal a glance at Eva down on the beach with her friends. The wind had started to blow a little colder, and dark clouds were looming far out in the distance. I could see La Bestia Hermosa making her way toward home, belching smoke and running like hell from a fog bank. 2 other rigs were running to her port. They were both slightly behind her. Everybody on the beach was starting to pack it in, and parents were calling out to some of the braver children who were still out in the water. There were birds flying inland, hundreds of them. I reeled in my line and jumped back on the pier when I realized that Eva had been walking toward me. I felt like an idiot as she walked up. I couldn't even get my mouth to open to give her a proper smile. "Hi." "Hello." I didn't know what to say. "Are you giving up?" She motioned to my empty basket. "Yes." "My God, you idiot," I thought. "Say something." It's getting cold." "Yes, it is." "Well, I have to go home. I just wanted to say hi. See you later." She smiled and walked away. I have no idea why I couldn't say anything else at that point. I stared at her as she walked back down the pier and up toward town. I cursed myself and turned around to grab my things. The fog bank was moving fast towards us, and the 3 vessels running from it were moving even faster. I thought it was strange that all 3 ships were running at full speed directly toward the beach, and not the docks. The ship that was bringing up the rear suddenly lit up, and I realized that a fire had broken out. I dropped my things and just stared. I squinted my eyes and focused. Captain Castillo was not at the helm of La Bestia. It was then that the 3rd boat in the rear exploded. Everyone on the beach jumped up. Parents were frantically calling to their children to get out of the water, but no one moved away from the beach. They just stared at the boats racing for land. There were quite a few people on the pier who were watching as well. As she got closer, I could see that the sword on La Bestia's figurehead had been broken. The other ship coming in also had no one on board that I could see, but I saw several gashes along her port side, and she was taking on water. She slowed to a crawl in an instant, and I could see something underneath her, a large shadow that stretched out underneath the surface of the water. I ran as fast as I could down the planks of the pier toward the beach. By the time I hit the sand, La Bestia Hermosa had run aground and buried her bow. I ran towards her, all the while keeping an eye on the water and the dark shadow that was moving closer to the shore. I was able to climb up the bow and call out for my friend, but he was not there. There was a slick substance on parts of the deck and up the side toward the helm. I noticed a sudden smell of rot in the breeze. Once, I experienced the smell of a rotting whale carcass while I was out with the captain, and that's the only scent I could even begin to compare it to. Several dogs left their owners behind and ran inland, taking off like someone had set their tails on fire. A few people decided to run back toward town as well. The waves in the bay stopped. They didn't slow, they stopped. The water in the bay was as calm as a pond, and the hairs on the back of my neck went straight up. I saw something break the water. About 30 yards from the shore, I saw a woman rising up and moving through the water with no effort at all, as if she were being pushed toward the shore by something underneath her. She moved forward until she was only a few feet from the shore. I could see her from the waist up. She was naked, and the skin of her body was gray, as if it had never seen the sun, but the skin of her face was a bronze that gave off a strange light that was impossible to take your eyes off of. There was no hair on her head, and her arms hung limp and lifeless at her sides. Her eyes were disproportionately large compared to her face. Fish eyes. They were moving wildly and independently of each other. The stench from her had me on the verge of throwing up. And a few of the people on the beach did. I'm sure everyone had the same thought that I did. Get away from the water. But there was something about the glow of the woman's face. Like it was attracting all of us somehow. Not specifically to it, but just enough to captivate our attention. To keep us standing still. The woman began to sway, and her mouth opened. And that's when everything changed. I looked back down on the beach, and every man, woman, and child had gone stiff. Their eyes had rolled over into nothing but white. After a moment, they all began to sway back and forth, and I saw the mouth of the woman start to move as if she were speaking or singing. All the people who were standing on the pier walked forward and jumped over the railing and into the water below. Everyone began to walk towards the water, towards a song that I was spared from. I watched some of the people walk right past the signing woman and vanish under the surface of the water. It was then that I saw it. A quick flash as the water rose and fell with the movement of the people. I saw below the woman's waist. I realized that it was not a woman I was seeing. It was an appendage. Below the waist, it resembled a tentacle, a thick, veiny strand of gray flesh that stretched back into the water, leading to the dark shadow. The still waters of the bay started to boil behind the woman, and the water turned a bright red as more and more people disappeared. Beneath the water, I started yelling at everyone, but they were in a trance, mesmerized by whatever sound I was unable to hear. They kept marching forward. I grabbed a length of rope from the deck, secured one end to a mooring cleat, and jumped off of the boat. I ran to the children first. I scooped up the first one, and I cinched her down with a loop around the wrist. I was able to secure 4 of them on the line that way. The fog had finally reached the shore, and the face of the woman glowed even brighter in the gloom. One of the eyes was fixed on me at that point. The thing that looked like a woman moved slightly forward and upward, exposing more of the tentacle beneath. The mouth of it began to move wider. It looked like the woman was yelling. I had every intention of saving more people, but I saw that Eva had started walking back towards the beach. Her eyes were glazed over and white. More people in the town were walking behind her. The call of the beast was traveling through our entire town. I looked back toward the thing. While one of its eyes was still fixed on me, the other was looking up the beach toward Eva. I ran to Eva and tackled her down in the sand. She was screaming and clawing at me. She raked her fingers down the side of my face, creating ragged trenches in my flesh. I sat up and cradled her in my arms like a baby. So many people walked past us. My parents, my family, my friends, everyone I had known my entire life. I cried out to them, but it was no use. I couldn't do anything. I tried to rock Eva back and forth to try and calm her down, but I was losing control over her. I could think of only one thing to do. I pressed one hand against her right ear as tightly as I could, and then I pressed my face against the side of hers with my mouth next to her left ear. I sang to her. I started shouting it in her ear, hoping I could drown out the song of the beast down in the water. I rocked her back and forth as more people walked past us. I watched the slaughter continue. The bay was red, and there were small bits and chunks floating on top of the water. The children that I had anchored to the ship were struggling like trapped animals. The eyes of the thing that looked like a woman were now both looking directly at me. When I came to the end of the song, I started to say all of the things I had always wanted to tell her. I told her all of the things that are too personal to write about here. They were for her and only for her. When I was finished, I sang another song. She stopped struggling, and I felt her hands grab at me and hold me. I kept singing as we watched the last of our town vanish under the water. The mouth of the woman closed, and the face turned a dull bronze. The light was extinguished. It stared at me for a moment, and then I saw those eyes move toward the children. The kids had come out of the trance. They were screaming and had run as far up the beach as the rope allowed them to. The woman moved backward, away from the beach, until it finally went beneath the water. I waited, and waited, and waited. The fog had brought bitter cold, and the air was thick with mist, and had a faint taste of copper. I stopped singing and looked down at Eva. She was crying. She reached up, pulled me down, and kissed me. I was shaking. "Listen, I need to help the kids." She nodded. I jumped up and ran toward the children. I reached the first boy and began to release him from the rope. I saw something break the water. A tentacle rose in the air and hovered above the stern of La Bestia. It came crashing down on the deck. Large, jagged planks flew into the air, and the stern buckled and then flattened under the weight. With a force greater than anything I have ever seen, La Bestia was violently jerked back out into the water, and the children were pulled back with it. They screamed and clawed at the wet sand. In a matter of seconds, I watched the ship and the children as they were dragged out into the deep. The dark shape in the water moved away from the bay, and the waves came crashing back. Eva and I never went near the ocean again. We've had a happy life together all these years. We never speak of that day, but I think about it often. I never thought I would have to live through one of Captain Castillo's stories. Although I was spared from having to hear those children screaming, I still remember their faces as they were dragged away into the deep.